I think the biggest question that everyone's wondering is, do I actually have a crush on Pokimane? No, but
Big shit, yo, cool little. Talking to your bitch, I'm Dr. Doolittle.
Studying. It felt like that was what life was completely engulfed in. Studying. Andy was a student at Montclair State University studying film production and photography. I'm not studying photography, but I am going to that college and I am studying filmmaking. It had been a dream of his for years professionally make videos and could share his passion on the internet. It was probably from the countless hours he spent watching YouTube, but he felt like it was almost his calling. That is true. No matter the reason, he was determined to finish college and start his career. In order to do that, however, he had to study, especially if he wanted to make it to the top of his classes. He had done pretty well in high school. That's not true. So he wasn't too worried. And he has built up great habits from senior year regarding note-taking and memorization, but there was no better place than to do it at Barnes & Noble's. I do love me Barnes & Noble's. Andy pushed his way through the entrance's signature heavy wood doors and folded up his dampened umbrella. He shivered, happy to be out of the cold and in the comfort of a bookstore. After repositioning his backpack straps so they wouldn't slip off, Andy made his way into the Starbucks section to grab a water and a croissant as a treat. After ordering and receiving his stuff, he went to the seating area in the back of the store and sat to do his schoolwork. He picked a table near the back of the shelves in the middle row, slung his backpack around so he could access it, now having materials out, and after a few kickstart bites at his croissant, he was ready to go. Only 45 minutes into his study session, he started to get distracted by people starting to come in and sit down at the neighboring tables. It was unusually a busy day. Normally, people would come in for at most 30 minutes, then leave after attending their errands there, but everyone would seem to be sticking around. It wasn't too much of a bother, but Andy would have appreciated it if the people were a bit more quiet. He did his best to drown out the strangers and continue his notes, but soon after he was interrupted again. "Is this spot taken?" said a voice from across the table. Andy looked up with a tinge of annoyance in his expression. It was a young woman who looked close to his age. "No, please," he said, gesturing his hand for her to sit. She thanked him and took her seat, now starting to unpack her belongings. As she did so, Andy watched her, only moving his eyes to keep a spine discreet. He felt guilty for looking at her with annoyance, but based on the way she reacted, she either didn't care or didn't notice, which made him feel a little bit better. The girl put her bag and sat straight to begin her business, and Andy quickly moved his gaze back to his textbook. She was pretty cute, he had to admit, but distractions like that were futile. Besides, she most likely had a boyfriend, and embarrassing himself by asking about that wasn't ideal. Wanting to clear his thoughts of the girl, he took a sip of water. "I'm Iman," she said. Andy looked up at her again with a short smile. He responded, "Andy, dude, if she said I'm Iman, if this was real and she said I'm Iman, I would not look up." Her face seemed to lighten up. She was delighted to see that he spoke to her again, but suddenly it started to fade. "Sorry to bother. See, I'm a transfer student from California. I'm trying to establish a social circle." Andy slightly sat up more quickly and said, No, don't apologize. You're fine, really," he assured her. A faint smile returned to her and she sweetly laughed, thanking him. She crossed her arms, top of one of her books, and she leaned in. "Do you like video games?" she asked. Okay, if a girl came up to me and I was being a dick and she asked if I like video games, I would fucking get down on one knee and marry her in that exact moment. That's not even a joke. Andy clicked his pen to retract it to the side. He wouldn't be needing it since he looked like he'd be chatting instead. Not that he was complaining, of course. Andy widened his eyes and smiled. "Do I?" he said. Iman leaned back into her chair and giggled at his enthusiasm. "I do too," she responded, ushering her voice. People had started to turn and look at the two to see what the ruckus was about. Suddenly self-conscious, Andy suggested they sit somewhere else and chat there instead. Iman agreed, and she started packing up. They moved to a few tables to the front of the Starbucks, but that wasn't an issue since Andy no longer intended studying. Iman put her things down but didn't sit. "Want me to grab you a coffee?" she offered. Andy shook his head. "I'm not a big coffee drinker. I'm more of a G Fuel guy." That's facts. I freaking sponsor me. I freaking hate coffee. It tastes like actual water. "Yeah," he said with a nervous smile, hoping to make her laugh, which she did. but I can use a coffee right now, she said, pointing a thumb over her shoulder in the direction of the cafe. Andy nodded in return, and she left to go up to talk to the barista. Andy closed his eyes, hid his smile behind a cupped hand. It was a genuine smile. He had met one of the most amazing people ever. It almost felt undeserved that a girl as pretty as her sought friendship in a guy like him. It felt borderline unreal, like he was walking on clouds. He shook his head, still smiling to himself. He shouldn't be thinking of her like that. She was a friend. She even said she was looking for a friend group, nothing more. But on the other hand, a little crush wouldn't hurt anybody. Welcome to Meme Break. Thank you for watching Meme Break. The next few weeks had come and gone very quickly. Every time they had the chance, Andy and Iman would spend a day together, whether it be at the mall, cinema, or Barnes & Noble, where they met to study together. Eventually, it seemed they were bored of doing the same activities and wanted to do something different. Iman sat down with a sigh across from Andy and leaned back into her chair. "We should try something new," she said, looking down at her coffee. "What do you have in mind?" Iman shrugged. "I thought you'd have suggestions," she said, as she lifted the cup to her mouth. Andy looked away in thought. He had to admit, he wanted to plan something outside the few things that they regularly do. He liked being laid back with his plans, but also wanted to impress Iman at the same time. That's facts. Do you fucking know me? She had said she liked video games and talked about them now and again. Why don't they do something with video games? Andy did have an impressive amount of video games and consoles. Surely it would be enough to keep the two of them occupied. "We could hang out at my place," he offered. "I got a bunch of video games. We could order a pizza and play games for a while." Andy added. Iman nodded shortly after his response. "Yeah, that sounds great," she said. Iman leaned across the table in the anticipation and rested on her folding arms. "Free Saturday evening. If it works, we could plan on that," she said with a smile. Andy smiled back. "Sounds good." Iman leaned back into her seat with her coffee coming back up to her lips, she said, looking forward to it. He didn't want to ask, but the arrangement felt like a date. He certainly wasn't complaining. But wouldn't it be too soon to start dating her? Yeah, he didn't want to ask, not even to himself. The idea was fun to think about, though. Let's keep it playful. That he would remind himself every time it came to mind. Besides, how she felt for him beyond friendship was unknown and harder to decipher. One day she'll be a little clingy and walk shoulder to shoulder with him, and then next his hands are in her pockets and staying an inch or two away from him. When Iman did that, though, he never really cared. Whether there was physical contact or nothing, it really didn't matter. But it did make her signals that she was sending him hard to understand. That's why he only assumed that she liked him as a friend and nothing more. Thus, why he didn't want to ask if this was meant as a date. Welcome to Meme Break.
It's kind of hot. Like, being vaccinated is kind of hot. True or?
I genuinely believe so. Can you please give me your number? Thank you for watching Meme Break. Saturday eventually came. Andy tidied up his house a bit, mainly focused on the basement since that's where he imagined them to be the most. Yeah, I tidied up a little bit, guys. I tidied up a little bit. He set out his video games, cleaned his desk, and pulled the second chair to his setup, and the last touch displayed his beloved Archie comics in a subtle yet noticeable manner. That's a classic ECLIPPZ meme right there. 4:49, and Iman said she'd get to his house at around 5. Trusting her word, Andy had 10 minutes to kill. He could order the pizza now, but he didn't want to get anything Iman wouldn't like. He came to the conclusion that there was nothing left for him to do, so he sat down and booted up his monitors. A knock came from behind him on the door frame. His brother stood there, almost confused, and pointed a thumb up the stairs. "Some girl is here to see you," he said, and Andy shot up. She had come pretty early. Luckily, he had done everything that he needed just in time. Andy walked past his brother with the quick, "Thanks, cuh." What? How do you know this? How do you know this is how me and my brother talk? There's a little among us. And we went up the stairs swiftly. He got to the door and drew a breath for confidence before slightly opening it. Iman made her signature smile and waved lightly. "Hey," she lightly said, excitement clearly in her tone. Andy smiled back. "Come in, I got everything set up." This whole ordeal made Andy feel like he was walking on clouds. Was this real? Is it a dream? Could it even work out? His heart escalated just enough for it to be noticeable, and just the thought of his own racing heart made his face heat up, embarrassed by his own reaction, which was very noticeable by the way. He only thought it was. He turned his face away quickly and stepped to the side to let her. Andy then took Iman down to the basement while his brother was shooting them looks. Dude, my brother would be like, hey, this is it, he said, holding out an arm to the room like he was presenting a wonderful piece of art. His nerves started to getting to him again, and the anxiety of having a girl in the man cave was pretty overwhelming. I'm sorry it's not much, he started. It's kinda small and well in a basement, but I cleaned it up a lot. All my games should make up for his apologies were cut off by Iman's hand on his mouth. She made a small smile, saying, you talk too much, and looked down with a bit of astonishment, but deadpan back. Sorry, I'm Jewish! Iman withdrew her hand and laughed at his response, commenting on how funny he was. So what games do you have? She said as she approaches his setup. What don't I have? Andy said. Legend of Zelda, COD, Skylanders, Resident Evil, Assassin's Creed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Iman Anus is very excited about me owning Skylanders. I have pretty much every Skylanders game except for Imaginators. I'm sure she's very impressed. But yes, I do have Resident Evil. And I do have Legend of Zelda. What the f***? Yo, what the? Hold up. I don't have a Skylanders near me. There's Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil, COD, and... Iman looked with the assortment up with wonder. Not sure. You pick, she said with a shrug. Andy complied and picked a random game. He put it in and sat back in his chair. While waiting for the game to load, they ordered pizza and made some small talk.
Thank you for calling Pizza Hut. This is Caitlin. Will this be for carry out or delivery?
Neither. I don't want anything. I'm not hungry.
Oh, well, we have your phone number and your name, so we'll be contacting the police. Thank you.
Thanks.
After joking around for a little bit, a swell of confidence built up in Andy. Waited for it to calm down after laughing at a previous joke he had made. Hey, he said, looking down, smiling. Oh god, abort, this could be a bad idea. He set his controller on the desk. He looked back up to face her, gazing to her eyes. You know, we've known each other for some time now. I think it's only fair that I tell you this. Iman slowly dropped her smile and looked at him confused. What's wrong? She inquired. Oh, nothing's wrong. I just thought, well, maybe. Andy leaned back and scratched his neck. I should tell you that I think I like you, like, a lot. He could tell his face was getting hot again. Iman Anus is a guy? Fortunately, the darkness of the basement did hit his blush a little. Iman put her hand on his knee. Her smile was starting to return, and Andy looked up at her again. She was leaning forward, making the mood more intimate. I like you too, Iman said, with a short giggle at the end. Andy's eyes lit up and he sat up straight. You do? He said, almost sounding surprised. Iman nodded with a pursed smile. At the side of Andy's mouth curled up into a half smile. It felt like he could breathe again. He didn't notice that he was starting until Iman shrugged and turned to face to the monitors again. Come on, the game's loaded, she said, then eyed him up and down, playfully adding, boyfriend. The end. Oh my god, Iman Anus called me her boyfriend.
Wanna fall in love, wanna fall in love, wanna fall in love.